going across North Court, you'll go into Hambrick. This is the recommended route, and high times will continue in that first section of Hambrick. And here we're talking about architecture and interior design. And, man, there's a lot to say about this stuff. I'm working on a little symposium paper for UC Berkeley on so-called Shanghai Deco furniture and architecture and design. And, you know, the immediate thing is to say, well, this is Western influence, and it's all about the West coming to Shanghai and influencing design and fabrics and furniture and so on. But boy, it's a lot more than that. A lot of this has to do with Guohua, the national goods movements, and with modernity and patriotism and nationalism and so on and so on and so on. As with everything in Shanghai, it looks simple and pretty direct to start off with, and then you start getting into it and it gives you a headache. But a lot to talk about. I could spend the next hour just talking about this pair of chairs. They're quite marvelous, but we don't have the time. You think about the Western family in Shanghai and how they would have lived, and compare that to the traditional family in China. You go from the gentry compound with multiple generations living in the same complex to the modern family living in Shanghai, living in an apartment or living in a smaller house or even a larger house, but living in a very Western kind of style, going to work, wearing Western style clothes, wearing a hat. You're going to have a coat rack, you're going to have various kinds of furniture that are going to fit into those environments. Rather than multiple generations, it becomes father, mother, and children. It becomes the kind of core for the Shanghai family. And they're living in these buildings that are called shukumen, these kind of the flats or condos of the time. So you have a very different kind of lifestyle. But that lifestyle isn't just about the West. It's also about, man, we're sick and tired of those Westerners beating up on us. We're going to do something that is uniquely Chinese. We're going to be modern. We're going to be patriotic about being modern. And we're going to make something that is modern and Chinese. And that's a lot about what Shanghai Deco furniture is about. And it's a lot about what goes on in the 20s and 30s in Shanghai. These people are tough and resilient and competitive. And they do this competition very directly. So we have Shanghai Deco furniture, we have Deco carpets, and the Deco carpets present a whole nother series of issues because these were largely made in Tianjin, up way up north, closer to the wool markets. And here we have Chinese shipping companies, these steamships that we saw earlier on, now the more advanced versions of them, trading up and down the coast, bringing goods from Tianjin to be used in these fancy houses in Shanghai. And we have images like, let's see, we go again. You all recognize what this is all about, right? This is yin and yang symbols. So we have what looks to be a very modern kind of Art Deco style carpet with very traditional Chinese motifs. And that continues throughout the various kinds of interior furnishings of this period. And looking through photographs, and photographs of Westerners in Shanghai. The Shanghai Chinese were not the only patrons for this kind of material, so were the Westerners. So it's a very complex and interesting kind of mix. Buildings like the Broadway Mansions building there on the left, 1934, again influenced by things that looking backwards are called Art Deco. Art Deco is something that kind of began in the 20s, but the name wasn't broadly applied until the 60s. So even in the West, it's looking backwards and looking at it in Shanghai. We start talking about Shanghai Deco, people start looking at Shanghai Deco in the 80s. So we're looking backwards and applying something to something that existed at that time. But this kind of step formation, this kind of you see that in the furniture, you see that in architecture, you see it in different kinds of design elements. But also we have all kinds of architecture being practiced in Shanghai at the time. Shanghai in the 1890s was defeated by the Japanese, and there was a treaty called the Treaty of Shimonoseki, which really sank the Qing government. That was kind of it, 1893. The Qing government was pretty much over with. And what the Japanese insisted on is prior to that time, trading companies coming to Shanghai or to the other treaty ports, they could trade there, but they couldn't manufacture goods there. But what the Japanese insisted on in this treaty was they could build factories in Shanghai. They could build factories in the treaty ports. And they did. So, and right, of course, immediately all the other Western powers wanted the same thing. So Western powers began to build their factories in these various cities, Tianjin being one, Shanghai being another. The result of that, of course, for a lot of China was just another brick on their grave, another shovel full of soil in the tomb. But for Shanghai, they competed. They went right back at it. And of course, as the Westerners began to look at longer-term investment in building companies and then building banks and building other kinds of facilities there, they began to build different style buildings. So those early buildings along the Bund, those were warehouses and corporate offices. But as you get into the Bund of the 20s and 30s, you get banks. And they're built in Beaux-Arts style, and they're built in stone, and they're finished out in very, very, let's stay with that previous thing, I'll come to that in just a second. They're finished out in very, very fine and modern kind of, but Beaux-Arts style, kind of more formal and more official styles. So this piece is actually from the Huifeng Bank, which is a Hong Kong, Shanghai bank, its original offices along the Bund. That building is still there, and you can go in it. It's quite a marvelous building, but the Shanghai History Museum had one of the sconces from it, so we have it here. Okay, other styles of architecture, of course, there was every possible style of modern architecture being practiced in Shanghai almost immediately as these movements were happening in Europe or the United States. They were in Shanghai as well. And again, a very complex situation where you would have architects who may be from Europe, they may be Chinese, they may be a combination of both, firms with combinations of both. Financing coming from Iraqi Jews or from Chinese or from wherever. The builders, of course, most of them would have been Chinese, and the occupants, everything, all the above and more. So very confusing, interesting, fascinating, wonderful, but rich, and hard to talk about if you're doing the Docent tour, huh?
And so now we're actually leaving High Times and entering into one of the third chronological theme, I guess. We call it revolution. And as you can see, we date this section beginning in 1920 through the Cultural Revolution. And so, the first thing that comes into mind when I say art of the revolution, you think, oh, Cultural Revolution. But we've decided thematically to place images that are rooted in revolutionary aims, not to be placed in this section. And basically, by the early 1900s, by the 1920s and 1930s, at the High Times, one could say that there's a global character to Shanghai society, not only in the different nationalities that are living there and the different foreign governments that are there, but because of this, you can say that different ideas and philosophies were coexisting. So that, for example, in 1921, you can have Shanghai hosting the first national congress for the Communist Party, along with, the nationalist government being in power at that time, along with left-wing societies organizing or using Shanghai as their headquarters. And so these different societies, especially, they saw, well, the commercial graphics that we saw, the posters of the women advertising, modern Shanghai, these posters, these images celebrate the modern aspects of Shanghai. But yet, these images that you're about to see, especially in the 1920s and 1930s, they were focusing or emphasizing, they were raising awareness of the negative aspects of what a modernizing society can bring, such as a wider gap in the rich and poor, or greed and corruption in politics, and how that is not translating to a better life for those below them. And so we've broken up the revolution section into different mediums. And so we're going to begin with ink and oil, or you can begin with ink and oil. And the first image that will greet you actually in this ink and oil session is this lovely portrait, this benevolent presentation of Mao Zedong. And so oil painters during the 1950s, 1960s, the majority of Chinese oil painters were studying under Russian masters, because upon the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949, the state took as their official art style, they adopted the Soviet socialist realism style. And so this style put focus on creating heroic images to inspire the people. And so on your right, you see an oil painting called Studying the Industry, and it's a presentation of two workers possibly working in a smelt shop, a smelting mill, and they are presented as heroic by looking, from a perspective from looking up at them. And so here they are, mighty young workers, and it's the workers, the farmers, and the soldiers who were regarded as the foundation of this new society, no longer the merchants or the educated elites. And so with the oil painting on your left of Mao Zedong, you can see that it's dated to 1968. This was made after Mao's comeback to power, because of the failure of the Great Leap Forward earlier, which ended in 1961. Mao was basically, he receded into the background politically, but he began his resurgence to power. And so images that were part of that campaign aimed to present him in a more benevolent light, and it extolled his virtues. And so we see here an image of him, flushed cheek and looking healthy, and in the backdrop is I think it was a vacation destination. Now in ink painting, there was also a resurgence during this time period, and the resurgence came in the form of what we call national painting of woodcut. And so especially with the beginning of this new communist regime, there was much optimism of, okay, society will now be improved, and there's hope for the future. And so there's renewed optimism, renewed nationalism. And so what woodcut national painting was, it used the traditional ink medium, but it described, illustrated their new realities, which included, for example, working by lamplight here, shipbuilding. Ship construction was a major industry in Shanghai in the 1950s and 1960s. And this painting shows great detail in the activity of the shipyards. And the shipyards now is the site of the 2010 World Expo in Shanghai. And for example, another woodcut shown here, celebrating National Day, it was made to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China, and it was painted by Feng Zikai, who has been credited with coining the Chinese term for cartoon. Cartooning was extremely popular in the 1930s, and he coined the term in 1925. And so even in his painting style, he utilized the same abbreviated, sketchy strokes in the spirit of a cartoon. And so moving along, we move from ink and oil for propaganda art to the graphic arts now used for propaganda. And the print was a favored medium that was used not only by social reformers, but also by political leaders and avant-garde artists, because in each respective time periods, different forms of graphic arts were believed to be the best form to reach the people, to disseminate ideas, and to use for social change. And so we have a collection of 6 propaganda posters coming to us that are in their display. And this example here, we have 2 coming from 1950, and the fact that it dates to 1950, it makes this poster rare, because the first thing that most people, when they think of propaganda posters, they may associate it just with the Cultural Revolution, because that was when it was most popularized and most widely used. But propaganda posters were used prior to the Cultural Revolution. And in this one, it celebrates the founding of the People's Republic of China. And so you have portraits of Mao Zedong on the steamships with phrases wishing him longevity and good wishes. Yes? How large? It is rather large. In centimeters, I know it's 53 by 107. I know.
53, so it's about 20 by 40 inches.
Yes. And they are colorful, and they were produced en masse, and they were affordable. Now, the other group of revolution images that we decided to put together in this section are these woodcut prints that came out of the Chinese modern woodcut movement, which was at its height in the 1930s. It was led by the renowned literary master Liu, and you can tell from these 2 examples his passion for actually typeface and font stylings. And so these artists, these woodcut artists of the movement, were impassioned by what they saw, the vices that they saw in Shanghai society in the 1920s and 1930s. And so the images coming out of these movements sought to raise awareness of the lower classes, the downtrodden, but it also sought social change. And so the publication on your left, it is titled George Bernard Shaw in Shanghai, and this is to commemorate the playwright's visit to Shanghai in February 1933. And he was so popular among the left-wing society that his visit created a cultural stir. It was the event that every reformer, every political leader, every artist, every celebrity of the left-wing society, so the left wing, had to attend. And so on your right, this is a translation of a Russian novella. And the novella fictionalizes the 1917 socialist revolution in Moscow. And the avant-garde artists were very much up to date, or they were very much up to date on what was going on with their left-wing counterparts in around the world. And so interestingly, actually, not only were the Chinese artists looking outward, were they aware of their counterparts, but their counterparts were aware of them. So that, for example, around this time, the 1930s, there was a hands-off China campaign in which communists throughout the world banded together to support China in their efforts to seek social change. And so continuing, we put this as a good group to compare and contrast. So the one on your left in 1930, created in 1932, the one on your right created in 1947. Now, the one on 1932, this was before the Sino-Japanese War that began in 1937. And, after this war, there was renewed hope again. There was renewed optimism in, okay, the war is over, and, so there should have been change to all the decadence and the excess that was present in prior to the war. But as you can see from the later print, that wasn't actually the case. There was actually more greed, and things were worse for the have-nots.
Okay, we're going to have to run through Shanghai today very quickly, but before I do that, I'll talk. Can we go back two or three maybe? I want to talk a little bit about the nature of the materials that we took. That one, go ahead. So, this is Shanghai visual culture, and a lot of your audience will be asking you, well, is this art or is it not art? You may get some of that. You're going to see some pieces that are not in perfect condition. And what we did is we were looking for things, we looked for things that were authentic. I didn't want to see reprints, I didn't want to see things that were modern recreations of old magazine covers or old posters and such. So these are the genuine items. And some of them are pretty beat up. And you will see that as you go through. So again, you might be prepared for that as you're doing your tour, but we weren't looking for replicas, we weren't looking for modern recreations, we were looking for the genuine item. And we found them, but oftentimes they're a little rough. So be prepared for that, and that may be something that people will ask you about. I hope that adds to some of the richness of what we are doing with the exhibition, because these are the genuine item, as far as I know, at least, unless they're making things like this that are making them today. These were around. These came from the period that they were made. They're not modern creations. So you're going to see some things that are a little rough, and you'll see a whole variety of different kinds of things. Different media. We're talking about the visual culture of Shanghai. So we're talking about graphic design, we're talking about posters, we're talking about textiles, we're talking about a lot of things. So amongst those are things that would be considered great masterpieces, Shanghai school paintings, oil paintings and such. And those of your audience who are snobs, art snobs, and say, well, this is fine art and this isn't, well, okay, that's their problem, not yours. Got some great stuff here to look at. Okay, let's run ahead just a little bit. Shanghai today, Britta Erickson helped us with this, and it really starts in 1980, plus or minus, and runs up to right up till now. And I'm just going to run through these very, very quickly. We'll spend more time on them in other lectures or in other environments. This is a really interesting piece by Shen Fan. One of these contemporary artists is actually a year older than I am. How about that? There are contemporary artists who are older than I. A fascinating piece, because this is an homage to Huang Binghong, so the great ink painter of the 20th century. It's a 2007 work that does that, but it's done in neon. So what this does is over an hour's time, these individual neon tubes come on, and it's basically like a Huang Binghong painting is being created, one stroke at a time, but each stroke is a neon light. We know there are 360 of them because there are 360 transformers on this piece, and electrical systems in the United States and electrical systems in China don't work together. So we're having a dickens of a time getting this one to get it to work here. So this is running our electricians into total nightmare. It's a fascinating piece. It's one of those kinds of conceptual pieces that pays homage to the past, but is also very, very contemporary. So here's one of those artists, contemporary artists, who's been working in international contemporary styles, but now is beginning to explore the Chinese part of that as well, and looking at postmodernism in a very interesting way. So that takes you, then that's the last bit of Hamburg. It's kind of separated off that way, and then you go into the Lee Gallery, and we have a number of different kinds of things. Again, we are presenting oils. Let's keep going on these. Acrylics. This is Joe Kiehai, who's famous for his Joe the Camel series. This one's still drying, I can tell you. This one is one he has done specifically for this. This is an image of Marlene Dietrich as Joe the Camel. So, Zheng Chongbin, who is an artist who, believe it or not, Shanghai trained, spent a lot of time in Shanghai, but also in Greenbrae, just up over the bridge. Li Wai, you all know Li Wai. This painting's 12 foot wide. So a big one, a big Li Wai. Liu Dahong, again, one of those contemporary artists who's been doing all kinds of conceptual things. In this case, he's taking those famous Mao and Wei banners, but when you see them close up, the images are of the Cultural Revolution. Rather than the lady from the Mao that was found in the Mao and Wei tomb, here we've got images taken from the Cultural Revolution.
And so we leave the gallery, and you can take, and I know that you're not touring the video art gallery, but just for your information, there is a text panel there with enhanced object label that lists the order of the video. It's going to be on a loop. There are 4 videos, and the first one is by Chiu Armstrong, and then the last 3 are by one video artist, Yang Pudong. Now, for the sake of time, I won't show the film clips from 2 of those videos, but this is the layout of the space in which it will be projected onto this wall here. And so, Shanghai Today continues into North Court, and here we will hang up grapevines, which is from our collection, and it was made in 1983 to be dedicated to the then mayor of San Francisco, Dianne Feinstein. So the mayor of Shanghai presented this to our mayor, and then it was hung in the central terminal at SFO for a while before it came to us. So it's going to be on display in North Court, because we also have another painting by this artist, Zhu Qitan, in the gallery in the Shanghai Today section.
This will only be up for about 6 to 8 weeks because it's going to dip. There's no place else in the building that we can hang it because it's 14 feet tall. So we'll put it in North Court. It'll get a lot of daylight, but we figure we can give it 10 years worth of daylight, and then we'll put it away for 10 years because there's no place else to put it.
And so in North Court, there will be 2 installations. The main one is this one, Vestiges of Process, Shanghai Garden. And essentially, the artist will build up the garden with gray antique bricks from demolished buildings that were constructed between 1923 and 1926. And so then he will build up these bricks, and he will place these large silicone rubber Taihu rocks. He took the mold straight from real Taihu rocks. And he will also include a silicone rubber base and also solar-powered leaves. And it being directly under the skylight of North Court, it should be fun to see those leaves open and close, open and close. And this installation, relates directly to a video that will be nearby on a flat screen monitor. And this video shows the artist here. He has set up an easel in front of a shikumen stone archway that is the entrance to these traditional alleyways in Shanghai. And what he does is on this easel, he took a water-based pigment that actually fades over time. So he draws the stone archway, and then the video shows the progression of this image fading, but yet at the same time you see different pedestrians walk by. Some are very interested, others don't even give it a glance. And it acts as a metaphor of people's relationship to the changing cityscape around them, with some being interested and others being not. So then in Vincent Note, we will have this installation of stainless steel books. It will actually be a vertical wall, and the books, each book has 2 questions, one in each page, and they are in 5 different languages. And the questions range from the real to the fantastic, and what the artist asks with these questions are, well, what he wants to explore the complex relationship between the people and the city, especially the residents of Shanghai and how they relate to their city. And so such questions as question number 4, can Shanghai build the first welfare bank in the world to allow poor people to get money whenever they want it? And other questions range from, will Shanghai be able to build the first rooftop garden in the world? And so, golf course. Yes, rooftop golf course. And that is the end of our presentation.